What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. I'm going to continue to examine 100 years of the greatest 150 black fighters of all times. I want to make a stop. I want to take a look at Joe Jeannette. He's one of the four, first wave of Black Murderers Row. Now, there were four members to that fraternity. You had Joe Jeannette, Sam Langford, Sam McVeigh, and Jack Johnson. Now, Jack Johnson would become the world heavyweight champion in 1908 when he would defeat Tommy Burns, Noah Brusso, and Sydney, Australia. So that would allow Harry Wills to join the fraternity. But as for Joe Jeannette, he would face Jack Johnson 10 times. The Joplin Ghost. He would face him several times. But Joe Jeannette was born in Bergen, New Jersey, August 26, 1879. He stood 5 foot 10 inches. He weighed 190 pounds. And he would begin boxing in 1904. But before that, Joe Jeannette would have several street fights. He would bare knuckle fight for money. And he would be successful in the streets of New Jersey. He would knock out Bill Gorman, have a no decision with Morris Harris, 6 rounds, and take on George Cole in 6 rounds. George Cole was a very good black fighter, and he was tangling with all the black fighters during that time. 1905, March 3rd, Joe Jeannette would find himself in a ring with Morris Harris in Philadelphia. He would have a 6-round no-decision contest. May 9th, he would face Jack Johnson in Philadelphia. No decision in 6 rounds. Same year, 1905. And right after that, he would take on Black Bill, June 8th, in Philadelphia. 6-round no decision contest. And right after that, July 7th, 1905, he would take on George Cole once again. Philadelphia, 6-round no decision contest. He would face Pac O'Rourke, North Bergen, knock him out in 5 rounds. Then he would take on Black Bill, Wilmington, Delaware, knocking him out in 7 rounds. Jim Jeffords would have a no decision contest with him. And then George Cole once again. And this took place in 1905. Now, if you were asked fighters to fight like that today, you'd be very lucky to get something like that, because fighters don't fight like that anymore. Look at the quality of names who fought in 1 year. But that's not over yet. He would take on Black Bill in Wilmington, Delaware once again, November 2nd of 1905, and he would defeat him in 3 rounds. November 25th, 1905, he would take on Jack Johnson in Philadelphia, and he would win on a foul in 2 rounds. Fight him again, December 2nd, in Philadelphia. This time it would be a 6-round no decision. And right after that, he would take on Sam Langford, December 25th, in Lawrence, Pennsylvania. And he would defeat him in 6 rounds. Now, Joe Jeannette is off to a great start. And one would only expect that from him. He was a street fighter. But he knew how to use a jab, he knew how to use his right hand, and he could punch. Oh, could he punch? 1906, January 16th. In January that same year, he would face Jack Johnson again. Now, he faced him in Philadelphia, 6-round no decision. He would take on Jack Johnson once again, March 14th, in Baltimore, Maryland, and lose to him in 15 rounds. Now, April 5th, 1906, he would take on Sam Langford in Chelsea, Massachusetts. He would lose to him in 15 rounds. That same year in 1906, Sam Langford, and about 2 or 3 weeks later, he would take on Jack Johnson for the colored heavyweight championship of the world. And he would stay in there with Jack Johnson for 15 rounds, but he would lose to him. But remember, he just took on Joe Jeannette did Sam Langford before that fight with Jack Johnson. And that's the way those men faced each other in those days. But Joe Jeannette would take on Black Bill, Jack Johnson, twice. Fought him a total of 4 times in 1906. 1907, he would take on Sam Langford, Jim Jeffords, Sam McVeigh, and Black Bill. He would knock out Jim Jeffords in Portland, Oregon in 7 rounds and have a 12-round decision draw against Sam Langford. January 3rd, 1908, he would take on Jack Johnson, New York, and he would have a 3-round draw with him. He would fight Jim Jeffords and George Cole, Sam Langford, and Sam Campbell, Jim Stewart, Jim Barry, Sammy Ferguson, and Morris Harris, all in 1908. 1908 would be the year that Jack Johnson would take on Tommy Burns for the World Heavyweight Championship strap. Now, Joe Jeannette would be set up the following year to face Sam McVeigh 3 times in 1909. We'd have 2 20-round draws, or 20-round decisions, if you will. But April 17th of that year, 1909, 49 rounds of hell with Sam McVeigh. January 23rd of 1909, he would take on Bill Taylor, and he would defeat and knock out Ben Taylor in 3 rounds. Fought him in Paris, France. February 20th, he would take on Sam McVeigh, Paris, France. He would lose to him in 20 rounds. April 17th, once again, he would take on Sam McVeigh in Paris, France. And he would knock out Sam McVeigh in 49 rounds. 32 knockdowns. McVeigh went down 6 times. And Joe Jeannette went down a total of 27 times. Now, there's different stories as to how many times Sam McVeigh went down. 6 times, 9 times. But he couldn't continue. Couldn't breathe. They had to give him a paper bag to breathe. And Joe Jeannette was cut and he was dizzy and hurting. Could barely survive the round. But I believe it was the street fighting that he would bring into the ring. The guts and determination that one would need to have in a fight like that. It would be to consider the Ron Lyle and the George Foreman of 1909. Which shows you what type of heart both those men had. They would face each other again one more time and go 20 rounds in Paris, France. Joe Jeannette and Sam McVeigh in 1909. 1910, he would take on Andrew Morris. He would knock him out in 3 rounds. Jim Smith, no decision in 10 rounds. Jim Stewart in Brooklyn, no decision in 10 rounds. Morris Harris and Sam Langford. Morris Harris once again in Black Bill. Now with Sam Langford, he would lose to him in 15 rounds. Sam Langford would become the colored heavyweight champion of the world. January 10th, 1911, he would face Sam Langford once again in Boston, Massachusetts, and he would lose to him in 12 rounds. He would take on Jim Barry. Jim Barry would be in the ring with Sam Langford 12 times. But he would face Joe Jeannette several times as well. And Joe Jeannette would take on Dan Porky Flynn. Sam Langford once again in New York. He would have a 10-round no-decision contest against Sam Langford. He would be in there with Jack Twin Sullivan, Buffalo. Have a 10-round no decision. Bill Watkins in Albany, New York. He would knock out Ben Watkins in 1 round. Joe Jeannette would take on a lot of fighters in 1912. Cliff Jones and Morris Harris. Andy Morris and Nate Dewey. Would knock a lot of them guys out. Black Bill twice. Black Bill will be knocked out by Joe Jeannette twice that year. And Joe Jeannette would take on Jim Johnson, battling Jim Johnson in Philadelphia. And he would have a 6-round no decision with him. Hank Griffin and Bill Raitt battling Brooks in Newark, New Jersey. Now he would take on Jeff Madden and Nick McDorgan in the same day, knock them both out. 3 rounds and 6 rounds. We do the same thing with Bill Bate and Balling Brooks, and he would knock both those men out in one day. And that was not uncommon in those days. George Foreman did it in Canada. Had 5 guys that he would be in the ring with, I think 3 rounds apiece or something like that. But Joe Jeannette and Sam Langford, Jack Johnson, and Sam McVeigh. Then you had the littler guys, Dave Holly, Leo Patterson, Joe Gans, Joe Walcott. You had Jeff Clark, the Joplin Ghost, battling Jim Johnson. Oh, you had some fighters in those days. In 1913, he would take on Jim Johnson once again in Brooklyn and have a 10-round no-decision contest. He would fight Jeff Clark, the Joplin Ghost, in Joplin, Missouri. Fought him January 17, 1913. And the results would be a 10-round no-decision contest. He would then take on Jim Johnson, January 21st, 1913. Fought him in Marsville, Rhode Island. And he would defeat him on a foul in 12 rounds. Now, Joe Jeannette would take on Black Bill once again. Have a 10-round no-decision contest. Jeff Clark, the Joplin Ghost, in Memphis, Tennessee. They fought him June 23, 1913. And he would have a 10-round no-decision contest. He would take on John Lester Johnson, July 22, 1913, New York, and have a 10-round no-decision contest. And the last fight of that year, October 3rd, 1913, he would take on Sam Langford, New York, and have a 10-round no-decision contest. When you look at 1914, several fights that year had knockouts and wins, no losses during that year. We take on men such as Harry Wells and Jim Johnson, Sam Langford, and Bill Raitt. 1915, he would take on John Lester Johnson in New York, have a 10-round no-decision contest, January 12, 1915 to be exact. He'd also fight fighters such as Bill Tate and Cleve Hawkins, Sam Langford, and Jack Brooks. He would take on Sam McVeigh, battling Jim Brooks, and Bill Watkins in New York. 1916, May 12, he would take on Sam Langford, Syracuse, and he'd be stopped by Sam Langford in 10 rounds. He would also take on fighters such as Kid Cotton and Jim Smith, Tony Ross, and Dan Porky Flynn. He would knock out most of those men that I mentioned to you. 1917, we would only have 3 fights that year. Tango Kid in New York, knock him out in 6 rounds, July 6, 1917. July 20th, 1917, he would take on Andre Anderson, fought him in Brooklyn, New York, and 10-round no decision would be the verdict. 1918, he would take on Jack Thompson of Philadelphia, 6-round no decision, April 15th of that year. July 19th, 1918, he would take on Kid Norfolk, Jersey City, New Jersey. He would have an 8-round no decision contest. He would take on Jim Coffey, Jim Johnson twice, Kid Norfolk, fought him in Hoboken, New Jersey, and then Jim Coffey once again. And that's some resume for the year of 1918. And 1918 would be the year of the Harlem Renaissance. Harlem Renaissance would take place between 1918 and 1930. And that's when all the entertainers would get together and they would have the Harlem Renaissance. We'd have jazz and art and theater. And it was something for African Americans in Harlem and all over the region to do. 1919 would be a year. October 20th of that year, he would face Harry Wells, Jersey City, New Jersey. And he would go to 8 rounds decision with him. Now, what was interesting about November 11th, 1919? He would fight the referee in New Jersey and also promoter of the gymnasium in West Hoboken, now part-time Union City, New Jersey. Joe Jeannette was very busy. And you got to take your hat off to Joe Jeannette. Very underrated. Not really discussed as much as he should be. but he's part of the first wave of Black Murderers Row. And I wanted to spend a little time with you to discuss Joe Jeannette. In the middle of the series, 100 Years of the Greatest 150 Black Fighters of All Times. I hope you enjoyed, because Joe Jeannette, it's something else. What a fighter he was. What a fighter he was.
I got a mind to give up living. Yes, and go shopping instead. I got a mind to give up living. Yes, and go shopping instead.
Now, to sum up Joe Jeannette's career, August 26, 1876, North Bergen, New Jersey was when he was born. July 2nd, 1958, in Union City, New Jersey, is when he transitioned. He stood 5 foot 10 inches. He had a 74-inch reach. He was a heavyweight. He had a total bout career of 104 fights, 83 wins, 10 losses, 69 knockouts, 10 draws, and he was stopped twice, once by Sam Langford. Now, what was amazing about Joe Jeannette? Now, he fought from 1904, November 11th, to June 1st, 1922. His first 6 fights, 5 wins, 1 loss, November 11th, 1904. June 8th, 1905, he would take on Morris Grand, lose to him twice. Black Bill, lose to him twice. May 19th, 1905, November 27th, 1945, was his reign. And he would fight Jack Johnson 10 times. 1 win, 2 losses, 2 draws, and 5 no decisions. He had 5 bouts in Philadelphia, 1 fight in Baltimore, 1 fight in Portland, Oregon, 3 in Madison Square Garden. He would take on Sam Langford 14 times. He would have 3 wins, 4 losses, 2 draws, and 5 no decisions. December 25th, 1905, he would win 8. April 5th, 1906, he would lose in 15. January 11th, 1907, he would have a draw in 12 rounds. March 3rd, 1908, he would have another draw in 12 rounds. This is with Sam Langford. September 1st, 1908, no decision in 6. September 6th, 1910, he would have a loss in 15 rounds. January 10th, 1911. And he would also take on Sandy Ferguson. Kid Norfolk, October 11th, 1918. He would lose to him July 19th, 1918. He would take on George Kid Cotton, March 24th, 1916. He would take on Bowling Jim Johnson, 8. He would have 8 fights with him total. George Cole, Jeff Clark, Jim Barry, Bowling Jim Johnson 6 times, Cleve Hawkins, and Sam McVeigh. Fought Sam McVeigh several times, but 3 times in 1909. What a career Sam McVeigh would have. But Joe Jeannette was unbelievable. So Joe Jeannette obviously is in this series, but I wanted to spend a little time talking about him. I thought it would be interesting in comparing notes with the fighters that we've covered so far. And Joe Jeannette is right there with Sam Langford and Sam McVeigh, Jack Johnson, Bowling Jim Johnson, Cleve Hawkins, all of them great black fighters who don't get the recognition that they deserve. The things they saw coming up when they went to the South, what they were not allowed to do. Some of them were not allowed to have cornermen in their corners. The dirty and nasty things that they saw. Some of these men were in the battle royales. Sam Langford fought knee-deep water. Joe Jeannette saw a man get thrown in hot boiling water. It's just stories that you read, and it's just sad to know these things happen, but they did. What's even more impressive is that these men survived all that and managed to have the careers that they had. And many of them will go on after their careers and be very wealthy. They would own businesses, make smart investments. And that's the great part about the stories that you read with these great fighters. So shout out to Joe Jeannette. Job well done. Outstanding fighter. respected by me and my dad. And I hope many take something away from this. Take a closer look at Joe Jeannette. Thanks for listening. Scrapbook Boxing. Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel.